Hi, I'm Christina and this is a book review of The Bookbinder of Jericho by Pip Williams. So this is a historical fiction novel and it was published in 2023. This is her second novel and it's the second book I've read by her. I read her debut novel, The Dictionary of Lost Words, in 2022 and I absolutely loved it. It's one of my favourite historical fiction novels of all time. So I went into this one with very high expectations and it did not disappoint. I absolutely loved it. I've given it 5 stars and it is also now one of my favourite historical fiction novels of all time. So let me tell you a little bit more about it. The novel starts in August 1914 and we're following our main character who is called Peggy. She is 21 years old and she has a twin sister called Maude. Their mother has passed away, so they are supporting themselves and they live on a narrowboat and they live in Oxford. They are both bindery girls and they work at the Oxford University Press and they literally bind the pages of the books. So we're following them obviously at the very start of World War I, and I will say that it is set in the exact same place and the exact same time as the Dictionary of Lost Words. So I think you should probably read that one first if you can, only because there is something that happens in the Dictionary of Lost Words that really hit me very, very hard, and it is spoiled in this book purely because it follows the same time period and it's set in the same town and some of the characters overlap slightly. Not in a major way, but something will be spoiled if you read this one prior to the Dictionary of Lost Words. So in terms of the characters, I was so connected to every single character in this story, and it's definitely not one of those books when you're going to start forgetting people's names or forgetting who somebody was or mixing people up, because every single one of them has such a unique and distinct personality and you definitely feel as though you get to know them more over the course of the story. So our main character, Peggy, is a bindery girl, but it was always her dream to actually be a student at the University of Oxford. As she likes to say, she would like to read the bloody books, not bind them. And her sister knows that she is very passionate about this dream, but it's not something she's ever pursued because she was very worried about what would happen with Maude if she wasn't there to be with her and look after her. And also there are so many hurdles for a girl like her to ever be able to attend a university. So that's our main character of Peggy. So the next main character is called Maude and she is Peggy's twin sister. They live together on the narrowboat and she is also a bindery girl. Everyone describes Maude as a little bit different, and there's times where she isn't really able to cook for herself because she might burn things and make an accident and hurt herself. And she's also quite vulnerable in the sense that people treat her very differently because she isn't actually able to hold a conversation in the general sense. She often echoes what people have said to her, and then she will reuse phrases that she has heard throughout her life and then echo them back to you. And she definitely is able to express herself to her sister and to the people who are close to her, like Tilda and her mother and Lottie, for example, but lots of other people choose to not understand her, if that makes sense, and choose to just kind of brush her aside and don't really get involved in conversations with her. So people, and also because of this, she's also quite vulnerable, obviously, to men who might take advantage of her, etc. So Maude is such a lovely, lovely character. She's so sweet, she's so genuine, and I love the relationship between Maude and Peggy. Peggy absolutely loves Maude fiercely, but there's definitely times when she's very resentful. One, because obviously her mother has died and now there's no one else to help care for Maude, but also she feels like at times she's holding her back and she's one of the main barriers towards her kind of furthering her education and going to university, because she feels like she couldn't leave Maude by herself. So there's a very kind of difficult, kind of complicated relationship between these two sisters at times, but they obviously love each other so very much. But there's also kind of layers of resentment at time, and also it goes both ways. So sometimes it seems as though Maude would maybe like some more time to herself and with different people and not always being, supervised as such. So it's a very interesting relationship and it's a really interesting sister dynamic, one that I've never really seen explored before, and I think it's very, very well done. So there are some also other brilliant characters, one of which is Tilda. Now, she is a character that is quite a big character in the Dictionary of Lost Words. She is friendly and then becomes friends with the main character in that story. And she's also quite a main character in this story too. So in this one, she was the friend and also lover of their mother who has died. So she is very close to the girls, and she kind of not mothers them in the sense, but she cares for them greatly, and she doesn't step into the role of their mother, but she's definitely there as someone who's always going to be there for them. And there's a lot of times when the war obviously takes her away from them, she starts volunteering as a nurse, and there's lots of times when we see Tilda just through her letters, and we see the way in which the war is affecting her. She's out there and she's trying to care for these soldiers, and obviously this affects who she is as a person, and she's a very important person in the other book. So it was really nice to see Tilda back in this story. When I started reading it, I didn't at first actually realise who she was until I was like, I don't know, 50 pages in or so, and I was like, oh, that's Tilda from the previous book. So yeah, she's a brilliant character. We have a couple of other characters as well, and they are a Belgium refugee. So the first story, The Dictionary of Lost Words, very much focused on what was happening in Oxford, what was happening in World War One. And this one does the same thing, but it also puts a focus on the refugees who come to Oxford, and in particular the Belgian refugees, one of which is Lottie, who I would say, there's a few people that do come as refugees, but she's the most important one to the story. And she strikes up a friendship with Maude, which is such a lovely friendship. I love the way they interacted with each other. And obviously with Lottie, she has experienced such horrific traumas coming from the ruins of Belgium, and she's experiencing some really difficult personal issues around the whole thing. You definitely say today that she has PTSD, she has serious trauma, but she develops this lovely friendship with Maude, and they're so sweet together, and they seem to spend so much time together and genuinely love being together that it's a very lovely relationship to follow. And then we also have the character of Bastien. So he is a soldier who was injured. He is also Belgian. And we have Peggy, our main character, decides to volunteer to help the wounded soldiers who are in Oxford. So she meets Bastien through this because he is one of the soldiers who was injured, and she reads to him. So that's one of the things she volunteers to do. She reads and she writes their letters and helps with their correspondence. So he's also an incredibly important character. So the last important character is called Gwen, and Peggy meets her when she's volunteering to help the injured soldiers because Gwen is also a volunteer. Now the character of Gwen really brings in a lot of interesting themes such as class and wealth and privilege. So she is a student at the University of Oxford, and she's also now volunteering to help the injured soldiers. She's never had a job in her life. She's never had to work a day in her life. She's very privileged, very wealthy, and so very different from Peggy and Maude and all of the other characters really in the story. And they strike up this kind of unlikely friendship in the sense that these two women never would have met had it not been for the events of the war and the fact that they're volunteering together. There is very little chance that they would have become friends or in any kind of way, because they live such very different lives. And with the kind of privilege and the wealth, they wouldn't ever really have mixed. So it's an unlikely friendship in that sense, but also they seem to get on together very well. But also it's kind of a difficult friendship because Peggy literally wants everything that Gwen has, in the sense that Gwen is given so many opportunities in terms of she doesn't have to work, she can go to university, she doesn't have to worry about money, and just little things like when they go to the hotel together and they sit down and they have tea and scones and jam and butter. It is like an extravagance that Peggy could never ever afford. So there's lots of times when Peggy is envious and jealous and resentful of the character of Gwen because how easy her life is because of her wealth and her class and her privilege. But also she likes her a lot, and she also knows it's not her fault that she is what she is. But also with Gwen, she kind of wishes that she was more grateful for her situation or aware of her privilege. So they have some interesting conversations and kind of fights where they don't discuss class and wealth and privilege as such, but they kind of talk around the themes. And one of the big themes in this is obviously the suffragettes and women getting the vote. And as Peggy likes to say, Gwen will get the vote because she will be a woman who has a degree, but Peggy, as a woman who works, who doesn't have land or property, will not get the vote. So even though women will get the vote, it won't be for women like her. So it's a really interesting exploration of privilege, wealth, class, and just even though things are getting better for women in this time, it's only a select number of women. And also Gwen's eyes are then open to this world of working women that she didn't really know about. And you know, just this whole kind of, she knew obviously, but she never had a friend as such. So she was seeing firsthand what it was like for these women. So she was kind of inspired by this to do something about it, and kind of, she understood her privilege then and tried to make the world a better place because of the friendship she had with Peggy. And she is always trying to help Peggy in the sense of she's trying to encourage her to follow her dreams and go to the university and try and pass the entrance exams, and trying to help her study and providing her with the books that she needs, and trying to giving her introductions to the right people she can meet, and trying to, you know, help with the scholarships and introducing her to the librarians. And she's really has Peggy's back at times, but Peggy is also so resentful that she needs this help because it was given so freely, the opportunity to Gwen. So it's very, very interesting, and the dynamic in their friendship is very interesting, and it shifts at times when sometimes there's just, you know, love and they like each other, and then sometimes it's more just resentfulness. So it's very, very interesting. I think overall this book is excellent at looking at those types of themes. And it's also just an excellent story. I loved following these characters. I will say there was times in the beginning where it is quite slow paced. So it did take me a little bit of time to kind of settle into the story and to properly connect with these characters. And it took me a little bit of time to warm to them as characters. Whereas in the Dictionary of Lost Words, I immediately warmed to those characters. So it took a little bit longer in this one, but when it did, I was absolutely hooked and really, really cared about what happened to them. So the other thing I would just quickly mention on is in terms of the war and trauma as well, we see how Lottie and Bastien especially are dealing with all of the issues. So they've come from Belgium, and it's the town they've been has been truly destroyed, and Lottie's also grieving as well. So one of the other themes that is explored really, really well is grief. So we have Lottie, who is grieving, and we have obviously Lottie and Bastien are both grieving for the place that they call home and their country. And then we also have Maude and Peggy and Tilda all grieving for Peggy and Maude's mum, and Tilda's partner slash, you know, friend, kind of her lover, her, you know, her soulmate, everything. So we see a lot of grief in this, and the way that's explored is very interesting. And obviously we see Maude and Peggy and Tilda after the mum has passed away. So it's as the grief is progressing, and then we see Lottie and Bastien, and their grief is so raw and real and like immediate, because he's literally lying there in his hospital bed, and it's just recently happened. And the same with Lottie. When she comes off the train in Oxford, she's just overwhelmed with grief because it's all happened so recently. So yeah, the theme of grief is explored really, really well. So overall, I absolutely love this book. I love the characters, I love the themes, I love the setting of Oxford. I just think it's a brilliant, brilliant book, and I would highly recommend that you read it. I just want to share a couple of quotes just because they're so beautiful and to give you an idea of the writing style. And I think some of them really make you think, and they're incredibly poignant. So I'm just going to share a couple with you. So the first quote I have is on page 180, and this is Peggy talking about her sister Maude. My sister had a simplicity that unnerved people, an honesty that made them uncomfortable. It suited most to think that her words were nothing more than sounds bouncing off the walls of an empty room. It suited them to think she was feeble-minded. Ma had known different. Maude didn't find it easy to compose an original sentence, but she chose what to repeat. She understood, I think, that most of what people said was meaningless, that people spoke to fill the silence or pass the time, that despite our mastery of words and our ability to put them together in infinitely varied ways, most of us struggle to say what we really meant. Maude filtered conversation like a prism filters light. She broke it down so that each phrase could be understood as an articulation of something singular. The truth of what she said could be inconvenient. Sometimes it made life easier to misunderstand her. I just think that's such a wonderful section, and just the way in which it really explains who Maude is as a person. And yeah, just such a great quote. So the next quote I have to share is on page 316, and they're talking about a particular edition of Jane Eyre. It was an Oxford World's Classics edition, similar to the one we owned and similarly worn from constant handling. There was a difference between a book that was regularly opened and a book that was not. The smell, the resistance of the spine, the ease with which the pages turned. This book felt a little like ours, but I knew it would fall open on a different scene, and that the pages with creased corners or worn edges would not be the same pages Ma had read over and over. When we bound these books, I thought, they were identical. But I realised they couldn't stay that way. As soon as someone cracks the spine, a book develops a character all of its own. What impresses or concerns one reader is never the same as what impresses or concerns all others. So each book, once read, will fall open at a different place. Each book, once read, I realised, will have told a slightly different story. I absolutely love that quote. I think that's probably one of the best quotes I have ever read, and it really genuinely made me think, and it is so incredibly true, that we will all read this book and take slightly different things from it, and in the sense that we've all read a slightly different, unique story that's personal to us and our experiences. So I just thought that was absolutely brilliant. I absolutely love the way that Pip Williams writes. I think she is such a poignant, emotive writer at times, and she really makes me think about things. So thank you so much for watching. If you have read this book, I would absolutely love to know what you thought of it down in the comments below. And if I have encouraged you to read it, definitely let me know that too. And if you remember, come back and tell me what you thought of it. I absolutely loved this book. It is now one of my favourite historical fiction novels of all time, and I think it is definitely going to be one of my favourite reads of 2024. It is excellent, and I would highly recommend it. All right then.